Starting your final pot. That was one that I didn't want to mention at the beginning. This is one thing I know, and transplanting is a bad deal. Now, one of the things I suspect reason being is an autoflower plant's the same way, but a seed plant has a taproot, and a cut actually has a fibrous root system.
So I'll pipe in a little bit more this episode.
Let's go.
I actually do know quite a bit about autoflowers, hanging out with Cortez, and especially with pots. Taller is better than wider, because that taproot is exactly the reason that once it hits the bottom, it goes flower now. So if you put it in a solo cup,
we're Jug Dealers, we're the podcast you need in your feed, teaching the game like you never seen. Jerin, Gabe, GRAMBO, true OGs, masters of the globe, set your mind free. From Denver, Colorado, where the data's green, we set the data points for the SOPs. Jug Dealers Podcast, yes indeed.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Jug Dealers Podcast, where we discuss all things cannabis and lifestyle related. Brought to you by the good people at 5E, and as always available at jugdealers.net and jugdealers.shop. And I didn't screw it up this time in backslash samples.
Samples.
Yeah,
so we've got we got packages set up. You guys can fill out a grower's form, let us know a little bit more about your grow, and then pick out one of 3 packages, pay the shipping and handling, and it's on the way. Easy peasy. Yep. We also have a bookings tab. Feel free to click around on the website, have some fun, but we do have a bookings tab letting you know where we're going to be at. Also gives you the opportunity to either click on the tab that says we're going to be at, for example, whether it was Germany or Amsterdam or Buffalo or wherever we're going to be, you can click on that, direct message us. Yep. And also you can request our presence at a cup, an event, your grow, anything like that. And for you commercial growers, and this is a shout out directly to you commercial growers, anybody that's working in a commercial grow or runs a commercial grow, we'd love to put samples in your hands. You can always go on Jug Dealers and go to the bottom and go to the comment section. That comes directly to me. And I would love to deal with you and put some stuff in your hands.
I am going to say too, when this episode comes out, I will be pretty close to being on the East Coast.
True.
So I'm going to be running up the East Coast from Maryland up through, let's say, New England. So if you want me to come by, check out your grow, take a look. We can talk about newts, lights, whatever.
Check the bookings page. We're going to try and be a lot better about, letting you know where we're going to be, at least in general, right? So, and we're trying to have that at least, a bit ahead of time. We're not the most perfect with this stuff. And sometimes it's last minute. Yeah. Like it was when I got the call to go to Amsterdam. That was last minute. That was last minute. So anyway, we are going to do, and admittedly, and this is kind of funny. Normally,
this isn't our wheelhouse, bro. This is actually something.
Our wheelhouse.
I'm not going to say it's something we rip on, but it's something we rip on. So it's definitely, but at the same time, we get a lot of questions. We understand there's a lot of folks who use these. There's certain parts of the country, i.e. Virginia and stuff like that, where they're very, very popular. And not for nothing. We get it. But Autoflowers.
This has been a little bit of a hot topic. That's for sure. I feel like in 2025, it's been talked about quite a bit.
We had to dig on this one. They're fast. They're fierce. They're freakish. But they are efficient as well. It's the auto flowering plants, and that's one thing we always talk about photoperiod and how important it is. How if it's a photoperiodic plant, autoflower is not a photoperiodic plant. And it's funny because depending on the part of the country, you'll actually hear people refer to, these seeds, are they photos or are they autos? Are they photos of meanwhile, a lot of us are asking, are they regs or the femmes? These guys are asking, are they photos?
Right. Which, and we'll delve into, I don't want to get too far ahead in the episode, but, obviously there's positives, there's negatives, you know what I mean? Whether, you obviously get a lot of rookie growers going because you do take out a whole segment, of having to do the photo period thing, of having to worry about light leaks. You can avoid all that. For people who just want to throw some stuff outside, you can avoid all that. But also you see more and more curious seasoned cultivators that they're wondering, is it worth the hype?
So I actually know some grows in Maryland.
Do you know?
Where their early season harvest is going to be an auto harvest, and then
we've seen that quite a bit in New York too.
They'll have that where they have the backup plants, and literally as soon as the auto harvest is done, they'll put more plants in that are full season ones.
And those are going to be around probably June 21st when it's those really long days, which is when normally we put outdoor out anday. Yeah. So, or I should say photoperiodic outdoors, I should say.
Yeah. And then reality is they'll have that time to acclimate. But, truth of the matter is regular stuff won't start flowering till end of July, early August.
I say August 1 just because it's an easy one to start. Reality is I think it's more like August 15 where we're at.
I've seen it even earlier. Dude, I've seen as early as like July 23rd. And someone hit me up and they're like, hey, my plants are starting to flower something wrong here. And I almost thought they were doing that weird stuff they do sometimes and they veg too long. But these things were starting to flower, and not for nothing, they were done, last week of September, which most stuff around here, is done third week of October.
I will say this. So I've had it where I just put them out too early. I put them out on Mother's Day, and they started pre-flowering because the days were already short enough, and then it was never going to come back. It was toast.
You're right.
But super sensitive, right?
Good point.
But that's why also.
Good point. So that's where the autos avoid all that for the people who don't know what they're doing.
But pro tip: anybody that is putting photo periods out, by the time this episode comes out, your plants better be in the ground. All right, let's like we like to do, Gabe, let's start with the basics.
Start at the beginning.
Start at the basics.
So Autoflowers are based on age, not light cycle. That's the big thing. That's why we talk about photos versus autos. So realistically, and I've talked about this just as far as large scale commercial growing, a lot of cannabis growers will go, oh, this is my clone time. This is my veg time. This is my flower time. I'm doing 60 days, Most people with other crops, they go, it's a 100-day crop,
right?
And so with an autoflower, they'll tell you, hey, this is an 80-day,
100-day, a 120-day,
that
whatever.
Means
all of it,
all said and done. This is when, and so you can work backwards from that and kind of figure it out. One reason that they are less popular with commercial places, they're unclonable.
Well, and exactly, and unlike wide leaf, narrow leaf or wide leaf drug variety, as we talked about very recently, or we'll talk about in an interview that we did, and we always like to talk about the lack of true indica sativa. That's not a real thing. It's all cannabis sativa. It's one, binomial, right? Now, Cannabis ruderalis is a little bit different story, right? Because again, you're talking about photo period versus auto. So this is coming from left field a little bit, if you will.
There's some ruderalis crossover.
Yes,
there.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons. Now, it was originally like just these scraggly kind of weird ruderalis that you've had to like kind of started putting in these photos to get some real oil on it. But I mean, dude, I've seen some fairly impressive examples that I didn't think that autos would get to. And, shout out to, and even like, Night Owl, I know, does some great work out there. And he sent me a very,
Mosca does a bunch of stuff, I believe.
Yeah. So, they definitely, got a really nice care package from us at one point in time. Nice. I love all the owl marketing as well.
So basically it's been crossed with photo period seeds, and I think they keep trying to work it back to increase resin.
Yeah. At least that's what I understand. Okay. The ruderalis is native to Central and Eastern Europe and Russia. So similar parts that obviously, the Afghanicas, if you really want to break it down, it's not indica sativa. Afghanica would be much more, because it's from Afghanistan.
That's advanced for many, but it's something we try to promote.
I love that you brought that up because it's one of the few. This is the first time I've ever heard in a Cannabis podcast. It's indica, sativa, ruderalis, Afghanica. How about that?
Anyhow, we like to. The thing is that's part of the bro science thing, and honestly, you talked about a lot about that with Rob Clark. Was nomenclature and a mistake, and it was he was very gracious in the nomenclature, and I thought he was actually going to be much more like. Like I'm very specific, and he's like, man, these evolve, dude. This is just like this is part of the deal.
It's developing.
Yes, and that was his point. He's like, look, we're not there yet. We're working on it. Whether it's strain or strand or what, any of these little things or flushing or these terms we've kind of they're not wrong. They're just
even clone versus cultivar or clone versus propagation.
Explant, clone, explant. I mean, there's
there's different ways to propagate things,
and I do like. Here's a problem: if you're not official and you're not using the correct words, that creates opportunity for misconception and confusion.
Well, and
that's the one big problem.
That's where our industry has been kind of weird, just in general, because again, like I said, we're not doctors, so we don't use doctors' language, right? But we need to use the language of the plant, right? But that's where I respect working with you is because you do have that college background. So a lot of the, you get very, you get upset. And you get very specific sometimes when it comes
to emotional.
Flush is like the perfect example.
Yeah, no, it is. It is, and that's it's just it's misnomer. Now we're not going to get into that.
Talk about the key differences between autoflowers and photos. One of the biggest difference, obviously, no need for 12-12. So here's a question though that's always intrigued me. At that rate, you could just run it 24 hours.
Well,
right?
Look, if anybody can actually comment to this, and I know even Cortez used to do run a lot of our gear. Shout out to Cortez. Congratulations, by the way, on your recent wedding, my friend.
Like at that point, you're running 18.6.
I think you're running 18.6.
But I'm wondering,
because I think he really is going to want some level of rest. I feel like.
I'm just curious. Has anybody done the testing where you've run 24 hours? Does it make it finish faster?
I almost want exactly. That's what
Does it make it finish faster? And do you get like more weight?
Because it's almost like a chilling units kind of thing. Once it gets to that certain point, like, and I've even done things with reducing photo period hours, like down to like 8 or 10 hours.
Right.
And I had to actually go a week longer. And when I did the total math, guess what? It was the same amount of hours.
Dude, Rob.
So like that, I do wonder. I don't know. Hey, everybody. Didn't want to interrupt the flow of the conversation, but did want to remind you that anything we talk about that are our products, you can find at jugdealers.shop 24/7 online. Go and get it. Support us. Help us continue doing what we're doing. Jugdealers.shop. Thanks a bunch. Now back to the show. Guess what? It was the same amount of hours.
Dude, Rob.
So like that, I do wonder. I don't know. And if anybody can answer that, I'd love to know that. My thought is, or from what I've heard, you don't run them full 24, maybe 18, 20 max.
I'm just wondering what it would do.
Well, I think the ROI is lost. I think it's just not doing much of anything. I don't think it's necessarily going to finish faster. If somebody knows better, please tell me.
Yeah, let me know. I'd love to.
Obviously, the other thing is it's just in general a shorter from seed to harvest because as soon as it gets through that juvenile stage, it's just going to immediately start flowering, right? Yep. Compact size, really ideal for small spaces, cabinets, things like that. Stealthy grows, even stealthy outdoor grows because some of them don't even look that cannabis-y.
At Culta, shout out to Culta. Always love those guys. One of the first outdoor gardens on the East Coast. But those guys do those autos and a lot of that stuff. They'll take the tops, keep that stuff, and then run it all for extract. Even just to have raw material, it's great for that.
Right. Now, obviously, no control over veg time is what it is. But again, easier for beginners in a lot of situations. We didn't have, when you and I started out this, autos were something that was almost like you could read about, like it was something that existed, but there was no availability to it.
I'll be honest with you, man. I think the first time I really even realized that autos were a thing is probably like 5 years ago.
Right.
I just didn't care. Like they were like novelty seeds to me.
Here's the thing though. They've been thrown at me enough times where I'm starting to look at it more and more. You know what? Now that I talk about this, maybe I throw a couple outdoor for the summer because I've got some of those. I've got some of those night owl seeds.
Dude, and we smoked some Cortezes in Chicago a couple years ago.
True.
It was quality herb.
That's why it's a great time to talk about this. I'd say 2023, 2024 was a renaissance of autos. Anything 2022 back is kind of not relevant anymore.
I agree with that. I do agree with that. I mean, a lot of people do think it's the express train of cannabis, right? Because it's super fast and efficient.
Mm-hmm. Are you saying like that's the original?
What do you mean?
When you say express, like, are you saying that?
No, I'm just saying a lot of people look at that in their mind like this is just the easiest way to herb.
Okay, yeah.
Just the easiest way.
I don't have to understand.
Easiest way to herb. Boom.
Turn the lights on.
Boom.
We're done.
Yes.
So
like, I mean that I get it. I mean,
if you're
I'm just an oil farmer, so
yeah. And if you're the type of person who, like I said, we see a lot of it in Virginia. So if you're the type of person who maybe smokes a pound a year and you get half a pound of plant. And you got 2-3 plants, dude, and you don't care. Like you're just like, hey, I just want some. Some product.
Look, why do you think when I was just in Amsterdam? Like, do you realize the CBD market, the smokable flower CBD market, which there was a flash in the pan in Denver here? Remember for just a second, that was worth money, but it was very. But why? You've been there. You know how much people smoke, so it makes sense to have a CBD smokable flower. A lot of these people want to smoke. They want to have the taste of it. They just don't want to get blazingly higher. They don't have the tolerance.
It's like Sharp's non-alcoholic beer.
Yeah, no, seriously, no. I'm not even joking though. So I do think part of that's like it's like kind of bud. You know what I mean? It's like I get a little bit of a buzz off it, but they're not looking at it like from an oil perspective like we are. They're literally wanting to smoke because they're probably cigarette smokers or maybe don't even want to smoke cigarettes anymore. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So to your point, dude, a few plants a year, bro.
That's plenty, man. That's plenty. So how do they? How does
this work though? Yeah. Well, it's funny because I want to say Florigen. I want to say was the mythical flowering hormone. They say like it doesn't actually exist. It was just like somebody basically came up with the name. It's like this must exist, and so they even gave it a name, but doesn't really exist. So anyway, Good question.
I'm curious, did it happen in nature or did somebody go and say, I'm going to cross cannabis with ruderalis and see what happens type thing? No, I think it's all nature. I think it's probably just a,
evolutionary technique to get to the next generation. You know what I mean? It's just that for whatever reason in that particular part of the world. So we're talking Russia, right? So even like think about Alaska or something like that, right? So even like, you remember the Alaska Thunderfuck or whatever supposedly was supposed to be a super short flowering, right? It was not an autoflower, supposedly, but now that we think about it.
It probably leans toward that. But so you would think it's something that's
right?
Super extreme on the
and even the shishkaberry. I used to grant
scale.
Shortest one I've ever ran is shishkaberry. 45 days and that sucker was done. They were little cookie nuggets, but they were delicious and they were done.
Yeah.
So like I don't know.
Make a good point there. It's interesting. Yeah.
But anyway, the long and the short of it is, basically no matter what, those Ruderalis genetics that have been crossed in with some of these photos, after 3 to 5 weeks, they just start flowering.
And there's just no external cues needed.
No, and which is also like, so what do you do? I mean, in my mind, you probably just go right to flower newts, right? No real need for veg newts.
I believe it came from like just genetically evolution. It came from a place where they don't even get to 1212.
Well,
right?
So
they needed a way to.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. All far northern climates. Yeah. 18, 22 hours, 24 hours.
Yes.
Here's a pro question. And, shameless plug. On an autoflower, we're going to need to talk to Cortez on this maybe, because what do you do? You're using New Millennium, right?
Right.
When do you switch from veg to flower? And
I wouldn't at all.
Do you use the decision?
I wouldn't. I would never use decision.
Okay.
I would never even use summer or spring. I would.
So just autumn.
I would use winter. I would use autumn the whole time. Why? Because most of your nitrogen's in equinox anyway.
Pro tips.
So I would just go straight to your bloom newts, because again, 3 to 5 weeks, bro.
Okay.
They want to go right to that direction.
So you think autumn from the start?
I think autumn from the start.
Rock and roll.
And rock and roll.
Okay, there you have it. There you have it for anybody using autoflowers and New Millennium.
I think you want to feed them fairly low.
Okay,
I think you want to feed them
5-15 type.
5-15, maybe even like maybe 412.
Okay,
maybe 412 to start.
There you have it, guys. So, if you guys are running autoflowers and you're running New Millennium, you heard it from the source. Autumn to start, and not to blow up Cortez, but he's got his own channel and whatnot, so I'm sure you can interact with him and ask some questions and whatnot as well. But let's talk about some of the best use cases, right? Yeah.
So like we were talking about, and GRAMBO just mentioned, right? Outdoor growers with short seasons or very northern climates,
latitudes.
You're never going to get.
Or if you're outdoor and you're just not sure about the weather type thing, trying to get that stuff down.
Think about it too, right? Even at your longest days, let's call it 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. So 5 to 5, there's your 12. It's only 16 hours, right? Yeah. That's our longest days. We never get to 18 hours in Colorado where we're at. So if you think about it like that too, it's like you go any farther north and like things are just going to autoflower themselves in a way.
You know what's funny, and that's not on the list is early season harvest.
Well, and you mentioned that right off the bat.
Yeah, and that's a big one where
that is
for the numbers, especially if you're doing if you're able to extract it and turn it into some type of other material.
Absolutely.
Markets like Missouri, liters of distillate are still north of 10 grand.
Yeah.
So you are just printing money at that point.
You nailed that.
But early season harvest without having a light depth.
Right.
So that's a huge.
Which we saw that. Yeah. We saw that in Western New York.
Well, and the nice thing about it is distillate, especially if you have the right labs and everything is set up right, that stuff stores real well.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? So
barrels very well.
And unlike flour, not only does it not degrade, it has a multitude of uses. People can use it way more medically and stuff like that.
Sure.
The dosages, edibles, anything like that. So that's where, honestly, and that's where I see it, especially in Maryland and stuff like that. That's where it really has the advantages is that early season harvest. Imagine being able to pull that.
And then, like we said, too, for beginners or people that just aren't maybe, don't have as light tight a setup or just have a little bit.
Great point. Hey, it costs money to
have a really good setup.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was always taught, especially in the commercial spots, wherever, you go into a room, you sit in that room for 18 minutes. And after 18 minutes, then you determine how dark that room is. And I think a lot of you would be really surprised at how
through a tent and stuff, dude.
Yeah. So it's something where depending on the genetics, if you have a cookies, if you have a chem, if you have something that's a little freaky,
anything that has that propensity.
The autos, They're not so sensitive to that. So that's good if you have these issues, you're in an apartment and something like that. That's where you see a lot of people, which leads to our next one, guerrilla growers or anyone just.
Yeah, shout out to our guerrilla growers, though. Are people still out there?
We still get people who are like, can you be discreet with the box?
Dude, a lot of times, whether it's in a backyard or in a garden setup, or even like, just a little more clandestine, they don't look as much like traditional herb like we,
Nope.
So, and it's not necessarily like the freak show or like the duck's foot type stuff, but it just kind of has a different bushier kind of look to it, and, man, shout out to the guerrilla growers. I believe that they'd have got used a lot more back in the day when guerrilla was really, really heavy. The genetics just weren't there. That seems, the one thing that seems to have really taken some time and some patience to get enough of the right genetics.
I got converted in the last 2 years of the DGC Cup blind taste testing. I happen to know out of the 60 plants that were out there, about 15 of them were Autoflowers.
No kidding.
I'm going table to table, and I go, you know what? I can't identify it.
Well, here's the problem, though. If you like it,
then I'll put my foot in my mouth. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but if you like it, there's no clone of it. So
well,
it's a unicorn.
A funny nuance to it is you can clone it, but the clones are the same age as the plant, so you can't
So how does that make
propagate?
Sense?
It doesn't. Now riddle me this. Riddle me this.
Not a real thing.
Riddle me this. What kind? Like how many phenotypes? So if I buy a pack and
I don't. Yeah.
So that's where I don't know like how stabilized.
Like F7 type.
Well, look, is it
how homogenous?
The most homogenous would be a true F1, but that has to be two inbred lines crossed together to get a true hybrid line. Which I don't know. Like you have to go to like F7. You have to have two like F7, F8 lines.
That's always been my biggest issue is you find something that's super cool and it's just like, okay, bye.
Well, right now somebody can tell me that if somebody can tell me that hey man, if you get a seed pack of this auto that you're going to get 2 phenos out of it and that's what you're always going to get, and you get another seed pack of it and you get another seed pack of it and that runs true, then okay. I'm listening, but to me that doesn't make.
But I think that's always been our issue is just the fact that when you find something cool, it's like, oh
yeah. Well, I mean, here's the thing, dude. In a lot of situations, the genetics are worth more than the finished flower these days.
Yeah.
So now what?
How weird is that?
So now, So now what? Yeah. You know what I mean?
Let's talk about the life cycle.
Yeah. So obviously, pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
Germination, right? Germination to veg is really about 2 to 3 weeks,
Yeah. Veg for a couple of weeks and then bang.
And then you're
doing the dance.
You're in there and then you're harvesting by about 10 to 12 weeks total.
Nice.
So it's pretty in and out. For some of the home grow tips, start in your final pot. That was one that I didn't want to mention at the beginning. Mm-hmm. This is one thing I know, and I don't know from personal experience, but I know that transplanting is a bad deal. Now, one of the things I suspect reason being is, and I assume that an autoflower plant's the same way, but a seed plant has a tap root, and a cut actually has a fibrous root system.
So I'll pipe in a little bit more this episode.
Let's go.
I actually do know quite a bit about autoflowers, hanging out with Cortez and marrying him over the last weekend.
No. Well, hold on.
You
married Cortez.
Officiating his wedding.
Officiated the wedding.
But I'd marry him, the little cutie.
You're not married.
So especially with pots, taller is better than wider because that tap root is exactly the reason that once it hits the bottom, it goes flower now. So if you put it in a solo cup, hits the bottom, it's going to start flowering then. It's going to flower when it wants to flower, so you can't make it flower later, but you can make it flower earlier.
Can you make it flower later if you put it in like a 4-foot deep pot?
Potentially, I suppose.
55-gallon barrels.
Dig super deep holes.
And so, like Cortez, for perfect example, he will cut.
That's
you know how you do a clear cup inside of he'll take a third cup, put it in there, completely cut it open, and then put it back together, gently put it into that cup. So that way, when he takes it out, it falls off. And you don't disturb that tap. Yeah, that's straight up.
So in retrospect to that, on the other side, you're going to want to skip topping. You're going to want to grow it apically.
Well, yeah, you definitely are. And you're going to want to grow more
low stress training.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe some pinching, something like that. That's what you're going to do. Non-aggressive stuff. And you're just
talking like the super, like the
yes, you got it. Yes.
And for those of you
probably more like,
just like
more like
gently.
Yeah, but gently, not too high.
Yeah. I was like a little bit of a twist in there. Little bit of a
slight. Don't go like you're turning the fucking radio up.
No tune in Tokyo.
Okay, I'm getting off.
To pull that out.
We're getting off track here. But yeah, no, it's more sea green style, right?
Yeah.
Smaller pots, deeper, like a 5 tall, or ideally even like a 3 tall, or even like with some of those ones, dude, that you've seen like the little squares, like the nursery pots that are real deep. Those would be kind of dope.
Hey everybody, just wanted to remind you that if you want to try any of the products that you see us talking about or using in our own gardens, go to jugdealers.shop. And now back to the show.
Pots that are real deep, those would be kind of dope. Anyway,
you want to feed it lightly in the early stages.
Yep. You know? Well, and honestly,
you're just not trying to push it too.
I don't think you really want to overfeed it ever at all. I think they're pretty sensitive in general to overfeeding.
So you're not doing the nutrient stacking.
Right. And here's the thing. It's also a consistency thing, which I think is funny too, right? So it's almost like being in Hawaii where it's 12 all the time. So it's just like, it's always 12. It's just like, and it's 78 degrees. What? 78 degrees. What? 78 degrees. You know what I mean? They don't seem to. Now, I think they can probably take tough environmental stresses because of where they come from, but it still needs to be consistent. It needs to be consistently shitty.
Yeah, and I think those stresses can probably push it to maybe finish fast. You know,
sure.
You know, as we know, cannabis doesn't like being stressed too much. Some do.
Well,
some
and
don't.
but there's also positive stresses, right? And if you're creating, oil production because of stress, and in our mind, it's positive stress because that's of horticultural significance. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the true pros and cons of autoflowers. Take it away there, Gabo.
You know, super fast harvest. That's going to be one of the biggest things. Some you can pull in as quickly as 8 weeks,
and that's from seed.
That's from seed.
Wow.
You know, so being able to pull that, I mean, to think that most plants you grow cannabis wise, that's just how long you need to flower. There's a lot of benefits that people like about that. They're small, they're discreet, they're great for balconies, closets, tents, if you're only
I love the balcony, you know what I mean? You think about growing in a city or something like that, like, okay, yeah.
You can get multiple harvests per season. So like I said,
without depping,
being able to plant those things in April, May and pull them down in July and then put another one in, it's great. I like to encourage a lot of people do autos early season, then do your regs late season.
I think that's a great option.
It's a great option for beginners.
Yes.
Because you don't need to know as much about photo period. You just need to know to feed the plant.
Your setup doesn't need to be as tight.
Let the thing die.
Yeah.
That's it. It's just
and don't overfeed it and don't overwater it. Kind of forget about it
just
almost
plant and
a little bit.
No stress with time cycles.
Our friend Doc Hollywood 420, he grows in his bathtub, right?
Yeah.
And he can still use the bathroom because he grows with autos in there. And so he flips on the light, even if it's in that 18.6, doesn't bother him.
He doesn't use the bath.
Shout out to Doc.
What are some of the big cons you see out there, J-Dog?
Yes. So obviously, generally smaller yields in photo periods. That's one of the big things. They kind of come in and out of flower so fast. They don't get that same, which is also one of the reasons it's discreet, though. It doesn't show those just big, hulking, fat, greasy buds.
And the next one, points to what I was just saying. Some of the, when you have some stresses, it's less forgiving. So mistakes might shorten the life cycle.
You can't bring it back. So
if you do something, you stress it out, and again, get it to flower early. There's no coming back from that.
Well, and obviously, let's say on a veg plant, I underwater for a while and stress it out.
No,
okay, I might have to veg it for 2 more weeks.
Bingo. That's usually that's my big point right there. The other big one that really sucks is you find something you like. There's no re-veg. There's no cloning. And
without getting into a whole lot of it, I am curious as, with some of these more, established auto breeders, how stable in that seed pack is it? 3 phenotypes you're getting is, and can I keep getting that same seed pack and get those 3 phenos?
And then you really need to be on, with a lot of plants, sometimes, especially you and me, we let them get a little wild for a while. We cut them back and we can still train them and make them do what we want.
Not this stuff.
The autoflowers, they're just not as forgiving in that manner.
Well, and again, it's also like you look at it one day, it's still, I'll come back and do a little bending or whatever. And then you come back 3 days later and it's got pistols going on it. Right. And you can't control that.
Yep.
So
let's talk about some of the things as far as, can you cross with autos and autos with photos? Is that
well,
I
mean, I would.
Where's that going to lead if someone's trying to do it?
I don't know exactly
Frankenstein.
I don't know where it's necessarily going to lead, but here's the thing: to get to the autos that are actually smokable and or let's even say autos that are viable for the market,
they're crossing them
already.
Yeah.
So it seems like
give it a shot, kids.
It's one of those.
It's going to take some time,
just like phenotype sort of thing.
Yeah,
you'll get different kind of phenos that have different amounts of root ruderalis kind of in it as you go. So some will be, that's how they get the breeding. They keep selecting towards the ones that push farther and farther while remaining that auto.
It'd be an interesting question for our friend Jesse.
Yeah.
You know, because he can really dive into that. Let's talk about some of the modern autoflowers, because as you and I have seen, you know, the reputation has really kind of changed.
And I like where you put that.
Last 5-10 years.
Well, I even think it's less. I think GRAMBO kind of nailed it. 2022 and before. That's kind of the dividing line.
I was being generous with it.
You were being generous
with it.
But I think it's more like 3 years. In the last 3 years.
The reality is they have a reputation for low potency. Inconsistent phenotypes, so they're all over the fucking place. Like I said, but also you find something cool and it's like,
but also the low potency, I'm not sure that that's necessarily a bad reputation. There's a reputation for it, but I don't even think.
My mom likes low potency.
I was about to say, my
mom doesn't like.
My dad likes low. He would rather smoke more. And sorry, Dad, not to blow up your spot.
Yeah, gets me too high, boy.
Dad. Well, I mean, I'll be honest. There's a lot of times he literally is like, dude, your weed gets me too high. You know, so the reputation could be good or could be bad. That's the only thing I'll say about the low potency thing.
Yep. You know, definitely, I would say that some of the modern autos are starting, like GRAMBO was just saying. I think you could see some of these in competitions, and you wouldn't know the difference.
Well, again, what'd you say? Out of 60 samples, and 15 of them,
and that's just the kind of the broken up bud. One of the giveaways to the autos is they get that atypical Christmas tree sort of look. And
that's the one thing you'll notice. Yeah. Like in a bag as buds, you're like, hey, what up?
Am I wrong in thinking that a lot of the autos is green bud? It's not a lot.
I think that it varies quite a bit.
I think there's
on that subject of genetics, though, what's fascinating is take a grain of salt with what the strain says. It'll say sour diesel. And you go, well, it can't be 100%. There has to be an asterisk to all sour or most legacy strains, cultivars of autoflowers, because you're not getting 100% anything.
Right. Now, allegedly, this low potency and this inconsistent phenotypes, and I will say, I've seen it with my own eyes, that in large part has changed and is continuing to change.
Better every year.
Yes, but again, I think there is a little bit of a especially in the bag, a certain look. You nailed it with that, GRAMBO, but crunched up, put in a bowl, whatever. It's hard to tell. You know, so some notable flower breeders. I already mentioned Night Owl Seeds, Dutch Passion, Mephisto Genetics, Fast Buds. I know that even and
I think Mosca, Dutch Passion,
Ethos did a bunch of autoflower stuff too, right?
Yep. He's always a big supporter of New Millennium.
Strain examples now available in auto, but as GRAMBO mentioned,
OG Kush, a lot of stuff. The Ethos,
Gorilla Glue, Tropicana cookies, and more. Well, how can you have that as an auto? Obviously, you know, there is some time and got to be multiple generations in there to get that ruderalis genetics in there, and then still be able to get the terp profiles of whatever they're claiming it to be. Mm-hmm. It definitely seems to be some patient breeding, I'll say. Yep. Supposedly, THC levels are now reaching or even exceeding 25% in some varieties, which let me tell you, I don't give a shit about THC, but anyhow.
How does it taste?
I'm actually much more curious into what is.
These aren't your grandfather's ruderalis plants.
What are the terpene percentages? Those would be, those would be much more interesting to me. Supposedly autos today can hit just as hard as photos. I haven't gotten there yet, but hey, I'll tell you what. Come with it. If you got some badass autos that'll put me on the ground, I'd love to give it a shot.
Best practices for home growers.
Yes.
Let's line it up, baby. Always start in your final container.
Always start in the final container.
Transplant shock, it just stunts growth.
Yep.
Use high quality, well aerated soil or cocoa. Plug right here, Scietetics. Question, if they were growing in the Scietetics, would they want to use the block? I think they'd want to use the bag.
Well, I would want to use the loose cocoa just because I'd want to be able to put it in a deeper situation.
That's actually interesting, Gabe.
I'm actually curious too.
No.
The block stacking.
Stack the blocks.
Would be perfect.
Yeah, there you go.
2-3 blocks.
Just stack.
Taproot would just do its own thing.
Stack the blocks.
Try the Scietetics. You can get it for under $5. It's a great cocoa block.
It is a great cocoa.
Keep humidity in check, especially during early veg. It helps prevent stunting. Stick with an 18.6 or a 20-4 lighting. More light equals
but not
better
24,
yields, but not 24.
Not 24. I mean, 18 and 6, I think you're saving a little bit of power that way. Yep. It's not much. I mean, I think you're probably splitting hairs at that point.
One thing with I can hear the comments already. There's no way around. You're using extra electricity. That's just what it is. Yeah. Some people will argue that if you're taking time off the back end of your schedule, you're making that time up.
That's what I would say. I would say it probably ends up being about the same. But Obviously, always harvest based on trichomes. Don't just read if it says 100 days.
That, autos or photos.
Yeah, either way, it doesn't matter. And those 9 weeks or 100 days, or whatever. Those are guides. Those aren't. Again, that's not a Bible. It's like VPD. Use it as a guide, right?
Bonus hack. Perpetual autoflower. How do we do it?
So what you're going to want to do, and this is honestly, it's funny because it's similar to like it's like I do my lettuce, right? Yeah, I'll do leaf lettuce, and then 2 weeks later, right next to it, another strip of leaf lettuce. 2 weeks later, another one,
and then just rotate farmers, through. Boys.
Holy shit! So start a new autoflower every 2 weeks. I just alluded to it, right? That creates a steady small batch rotation, and you're harvesting every month essentially. One thing that's nice about that too, you're not getting as much as you do on photos, and I'm not going to lie, I think you probably end up smoking more. That's just my thought. But we want to talk about, a little bit of, some of our final thoughts, right? I'm still not 100% convinced, but I am curious. I'm getting much more curious as other people are. They do offer speed. They do offer simplicity. They do offer stealth. Stealth, I think, is one of the more interesting things for me. And I love the idea of being like porch.
Use for the rookies, for the novices, bro.
Well, and I think also for just busy people,
right? Because like you said, if you F something up, it's like, hey, let's throw it back. Let's veg it out a little bit.
I don't disagree with that.
As long as you mind your P's and Q's, maybe it is good for you.
But also, it's also easy enough to go throw another one out there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's not awful either. But I also think it's a wonderful entry point for people that are trying to get into growing, right? Or somebody that's just a little bit of a side project. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I do think, and this is what I actually see more and more people doing it. People like us that just throw a few on the side for fun. I see that more and more. I got 2 autoflowers in the back. We'll see what happens.
Always calls it his bumper crop. He'll throw in into his veg. He has extra veg space. He'll throw a couple in there, set it and forget it. And you get a little strange every now and then,
but a little strange. It's like, okay, I digress. Here,
keep call it on track, boys.
Call to action. All right, because as you can see, we're not the most versed in this stuff. So if you do have a cool autoflower tip, a badass autoflower photo, or questions that we may be able to answer,
the questions episode.
We definitely like to do that. And I think we're going to start more and more, rather than doing full questions episodes, even putting like 2 or 3 questions at the end of an episode. So do, our normal kind of 30 minutes, whatever, like we have today, and then throw some questions on the end. It's something we've been thinking about. So
and we'll always
keep those questions coming.
And if you have any interview recommendations, we're open, because we're always doing.
Hey man,
we got some huge. We got some huge stuff.
You never know. You never know. You never know who we're going to get in this studio, or at least piped in on this camera, on this studio, or on this screen. You never know. You never know. But guys, this has kind of been funny and fun, because this isn't what we have expertise in, but I have actually learned something myself, as we normally always do in this. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out. We always have a pleasure doing this. Thank you for your continued support. Check out jugdealers.net for any of your needs.
Like and subscribe and share, dude. We never say it enough.
Yeah, we're not good
like
at that.
And subscribe and share. We're approaching 15,000 viewers.
Help us out.
Subscribe, share, go to the shop, buy our stuff. It feeds our kids. We love you guys.
Peace out, guys. Appreciate the support. We'll see you soon from the Jug Den. We're out.
Buy our stuff.